Are you the fanatic we're looking for? Welcome to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is the only interactive and dynamic mock draft simulator. Dynamic means that the picks from one mock draft will influence the players that team selects in the next mock draft. This can be done with a first-round challenge. This can be done with a second-round challenge. This will be done with any mock draft from the Draft Professor. In addition, the Draft Professor has rank players functionality, allowing you to rank players and build your own big board and then compare your board to that of other users at the Draft Professor. In addition, the Draft Professor has draft a team functionality. This allows 2 or more users to snake draft a team of 22 players from the rookie pool, and then you can debate which players you like at which position and why. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm here as usual with Jake and Josh. And how you doing, Jake?
Man, I'm doing good. It's same night, same time, different vibes. We're talking receivers tonight. We're talking Senior Bowl specifically. So I'm super excited just to mix it up and to hop into a position that I think everybody loves. So I think it's going to be a good show.
Cool. Josh, how you doing?
Good, and it's good to be doing receivers as well. If you guys haven't known already, me, Jim, and Jake, we're all going to be heading down to Mobile, not just for the game, to watch all the practices, see these guys up in person, go against the one-on-one drill. So think of this as a little pre-scouting report to what we'll actually see in person, give you guys a little overview of what's going on with these receivers going down to Mobile.
Yeah, so to give everybody like a little bit of background, if this is the first time you've caught the episode. So Jake, Josh, and I have been podcasting running backs and linebackers for what feels like 3 months. I know it wasn't that long, but it was a while. And all 3 of us are going to the Senior Bowl. And when we did the wide receiver scouting reports on Fridays, there were some players that were identified, hey, the grade that was given on the receivers was kind of far apart. Now, the ironic thing was several of them are going to the Senior Bowl. So at minimum, just from a podcasting content standpoint, I wanted more content on the receivers. And then the fact that the 3 of us are going to the Senior Bowl, it made it just a really good fit. So for the next several Mondays, Jake, Josh, and I are going to go through some players where maybe people didn't quite see the player the same way. So it's a third and a fourth set of eyes. And we're also going to cover some Senior Bowl players. So we have a big opening for this episode, and that's wide receiver Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. So Josh, what do you want to tell us about Emeka Egbuka?
Emeka Egbuka is not going to be talked about as one of the upper echelon talents in this draft class, a little bit because of prospect fatigue, a little bit because he's not the elite traits guy in the world. But this is going to be a quarterback's best friend at the next level. Do not get it twisted. He brings alignment versatility to the table, but we love him best as a Z and a slot receiver. And he can really separate himself at all 3 levels of the field. He has the speed to beat defenders vertically. He has the mental processing and the separation quickness to get open on those intermediate dig routes, corner routes, out routes. And he loves to work over the short area parts of the field as well on those mesh routes. He presents himself well. This is just an overall well-rounded wide receiver. There's not many, if any, holes in his game. He also brings it as a run blocker too, which is something that I really do value in my receivers, because if you're going to translate to the NFL at the next level and not be good at supporting run blocking, you have to have those elite athletic traits and make people miss in the open field. And while Egbuka can do that more than fine, that's not his calling card, and nor should it be in the NFL. But with all the discourse and the wide receivers going on, imagine this guy eliminating Travis Hunter, Imagine this guy with the T-Max and the Luther Burdens of the world. They all give you something in a different variety. But if you're looking for the safe option, the most well-rounded, and the guy that can really bring almost a lot of what they bring to the table all kind of mixed together, Egbuka is going to be your guy. So don't let the prospect fatigue get to you. This guy won't fall past pick 50, in my opinion. And I'm a little higher on him than most. He's my wide receiver 2 now, with Travis Hunter being wide receiver 1. And I have him as a firm first-round grade. He's in my top 20 to 25. I don't know where exactly on my board, but Emeka Egbuka.
Well, you have him higher than T-Mac?
Yes, I do.
Okay, look at that. We're starting this out with a hot take. I didn't know that was coming. Cool, Jake.
We told you we're going to bring it this week.
Yeah.
I am a little lower on Emeka. I am very happy he returned to school this past season, because last year there was that whispering that he might be coming out, and I had him labeled as an early bust right from the get-go. And I think he returned to school this season and worked on a lot of what I wanted him to improve upon. Like Bill said in the comments, he's always kind of been that Robin. If it's not Marvin Harrison Jr., it's now Jeremiah Smith. So he's always been that wide receiver 2 on his own team. And I think that's going to continue in the league. He's a pure slot receiver. So this isn't a guy that I think has that inside-out versatility, which does knock him slightly. I think of him similar to like I think Chris Godwin is a good comp, but I think Chris Godwin's a little bit better on the outside. Mm-hmm. He's got that same ride of a JSN that came out just a few years ago out of the same program, but starts out very hot. And he was a highly touted prospect as well, which leads to that fatigue. But as a sophomore, has 1,100 yards and playing second fiddle to Marvin Harrison Jr. with CJ Stroud, has that great season, and then kind of falls off a little bit last year with Kyle McCord, and kind of rebounded this past season with Will Howard. So you do love to see that he kind of bounced back to where he kind of was. I think this might be one of the safer wide receivers in this draft class, just based off what he brings to the table. Route running, he's a savant there. I think he could add some more functional strength to the line of scrimmage. He does a great job of blending his feet to his hands and to defeat press. So even though he's lacking in the size department, it's not a huge concern for me, specifically since he will be in the slot. I love the way he varies his speed throughout his routes. Gotta love that. It's like smooth jazz. You just never know the next note and what it's going to invoke in you. And he makes me want to move. I wrote down Nightcrawler. If you guys are fans of the X-Men, and I know X-Men 97 came out earlier this year, and he just disappears in front of defenders and then just blows by him. So that's what you're getting out of Emeka. I as well have a first-round grade on him as of now. Still got to dive more into a lot of these guys' tapes. I'd probably be more comfortable with him in the second round. And if this was a deeper class, I could see him falling out. But just based off what I've heard this year with the first round talent, I think he's going to get moved up into that range. I think he still could be potentially a little bit overhyped. But at the end of the day, like I said, you're getting a very safe prospect. And I don't think he really has anything to prove at this point in time, which hence why he's not attending the Senior Bowl. Obviously still playing as well, could change, but I don't expect Jim Nagy adding this to his prospects down the line.
Okay. And so Jake, if Tennessee took him at the early part of round 2, you'd be okay with that?
Oh yeah. If they took him at 34, perfectly happy with that. That'd be perfectly fine with me. I think that's where he kind of belongs, but I do think he will get he'll get pushed up draft boards just because of the lacking in talent. And right now, I don't think we have a definitive wide receiver 4 in this class. With Josh, obviously, he's got him up there, but I think typically we're going to see the Tet McMillans, the Luther Burdens, the Travis Hunters, and I think Emeka fits slowly right below that is kind of where I think consensus is going to land.
Okay. And Josh, I think I already know the answer to this one, but if Baltimore were to snag Egbuka at the back end of round 1, you're probably going to be jumping up and down a little bit.
I'm going to be happy with the result just because you know exactly what you're going to get with Emeka Egbuka. And that's one of the few things you can't say about a lot of these prospects. You know what they're going to project to be. But Emeka Egbuka is pro ready. He can slide in right away for whatever offense needs him. I think he can fit almost any scheme in the NFL, whether it's a spread offense, more under center offense, whatever you decide to do with him. But I think Baltimore has other needs. I think they're going to attack other positions instead of wide receiver. But if they were to take Egbuka, I'd be more than fine with it.
Okay, so the Robin comment from Bill Sparks in the comments. So if you haven't caught one of Bill's podcasts on Tuesdays or Fridays, give it a look. But when Bill had done Egbuka and he was doing it with Randall, and I'm like listening to him, and I said, "Well, it sounds like you're describing a Robin."
Mm-hmm.
Right, like meaning that he's not necessarily going to be the alpha receiver in a room.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they said, yeah, that's actually like the right way to describe it. So you want to add Egbuka to a wide receiver room, but he's not necessarily going to be the guy. At least he hasn't been in college. He's always had another receiver on the other side of him. So I think that's I haven't heard anybody discount the fact that he's probably a Robin.
Yeah, no,
I've yet to hear an anti-Robin comment on Egbuka.
And it'll go to a test with this wide receiver class in my mind. Of course, you have the T-Max and the Luther Burdens of the world. But in my opinion, outside of Travis Hunter, there's not really that alpha wide receiver one right away. There's a couple guys that can develop into that, but that's why you see kind of a little bit of discourse with the top receivers.
Okay. So another non-Senior Bowl wide receiver that we're covering in this podcast today is Elic Ayomanor from Stanford. So, Jake, what did you see with Elic Ayomanor?
Yeah, Ayomanor, I think when we were kind of putting together this show and these high variance players, this is one that really stood out for me just because he's a very high variance guy. Talking just speed to size ratio, I think he's the best that we're going to talk about today. I think he can get up on defenders really quick, has a decently diverse release package, I believe, but at the same time, there's these little things that he needs to work on. So very high variance in that right, has good hands, I think, natural hand catcher, but also had 6 drops this past season as well. Got to clean that up. Got to give shout out to good friend Stoney Keeley, who covers the Titans as well, probably the most respected as far as draft goes for the Titans. He posted some Ayomanor clips the other day and put out he run blocks with hate in his heart. And that I just heard that. So I wrote down Mike Rowe when I was watching the tape because this is the dirty jobs guy. You want to give him all that dirty work and he'll get in the trenches and mix it up. And some of the concerning things I saw is with that speed that he possesses, I still see a lack of separation. So I think that's something he could benefit from being at a Senior Bowl or something like that. So we could see him on the 101s and see if he can separate deep down the field because the separation wasn't there for me. And one of the metrics I really like looking at is yards per route run. It was below 2, which I think is the lowest that we're going to talk about today, if not the second lowest. So I think he's got to improve upon that. But at the same time, he's 21 years old, youngest guy that we're going to talk about today as well. So he has the highest ceiling for me right now, but also decently low floor. So I think he can improve upon a lot of those things. I have a 4th round grade on him as of now. That could rise, but just from initial watch, I see a lot of red flags, but I also see some green too.
So Josh.
So this is going to be one where we have a little bit of variance on it, but I absolutely agree with Jake on the fact that this is one of the highest potential guys in this class, but it's also a guy that you understand the floor that he's going to bring in. And we'll talk about his efficiencies first. I think he needs to improve his quickness off the line of scrimmage when he's in those release packages. He uses his strength well, and he gets on top of defenders to create separation at times, but that needs to improve as well. His separation quickness is just not there yet for NFL standards, and he can improve upon his yard after catch. I think it's solid right now, but there's room for growth in there. But besides another guy that we're going to be talking about later today. This is the second best run blocking wide receiver in this class, and it's not even close. He blocks with hate in his heart, just like Jake says. Good technique. He really holds the point of attack well, good use of hands. And the thing that's going to get him his stock rose when we start getting into the later parts of the draft season is his play speed, especially when he gets vertical. It's his hands. Even though he has those concentration drops, those acrobatic outside of his body catches are one of the best besides T-Mac in this draft class. He makes some ridiculous catches when he has open space, and his body control goes to attest to that as well. He's a very good body controller, such catching traffic type of receiver. So he needs to improve upon his separation. He needs to improve upon his release, and I would like to see more in the yards after catch department. But if you're betting on the traits, this is your guy. Well built, really good at run blocking, plays with great toughness. And for me, I would bet on those traits personally, just because of how this draft class at wide receiver is stacking out. So he's a late first round, early second round grade for me. A team's going to bet on those traits and want to develop him. I don't know if this is a guy that you can give 50% of the snaps to start the year. Maybe he can work his way into that, but I'm seeing year 2, year 3, year 4, when he gets to 22, 23 years old, and he starts to really understand the game and where to use his strengths best. This is a guy that could really turn into something at the next level with the proper coaching. So he's 27th on my board right now. That could also be changed as we go along this process, but a guy I'm willing to bet the traits on. He's my wide receiver 5 right now.
Okay. I think that's an interesting concept that Josh brought up. If this is a guy that you're putting in a developmental process, like you said, he's got him pretty high on his board. Potential first round, did I hear 27th overall? Yeah. So potential first round pick. That gives you that extra year potentially to develop him. But if you see him as a day 2, day 3 prospect, and you're waiting till year 3 to get that overall production out of him, then you have to make that decision based off 1 year production. Do you pay that guy at that point in time, or are you developing him for somebody else? So exactly. I think that's an interesting concept just behind it all. So yeah, I do agree with what Josh said though.
So like, obviously, like, we don't, just so everybody knows, we don't really talk amongst the three of us about what everybody's takes are, right? we align on the player list. I had no idea what you guys were going to say, and I'm sitting here almost speechless, but not really. I can't be speechless. But I'm amazed that you're even wider apart than Randall and Bill. So that's actually moderately, like, I am humored. So Bill, I know that you're listening.
I saw Bill was a big Ayomanor fan.
He is the biggest Ayomanor fan.
Yeah. But this is okay because there's plenty of people that are mocking him in round 1. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't know that I have heard some of the things that you guys brought up in your scouting reports in him. So I think that's a very good, authentic take. But the great news is the next 7 players we're going to cover are all Senior Bowl. Mm-hmm. And we can pretty much say higher or lower than Egbuka, higher or lower than Ayomanor on the next 7 guys that we cover. So the first Senior Bowl player, and this is a high riser or a recent riser on draft boards, is Savion Williams from TCU. So Jake,
yeah,
want to start with Savion Williams?
Savion Williams is interesting. He's been on my radar for several years now, just because I get to watch TCU play Oklahoma every single year. And Williams is the get off the bus kind of player. You can see him from the sidelines. He sticks out like a sore thumb. This is a guy that's he is rising up draft boards. I saw one of the PFF guys had him way up there, and that's perfectly fine because I do get it. I think it has taken him longer than I anticipated to get to where he is today. So that developmental angle, once he gets to the next level, will that continue, or is he going to have this slow trajectory at the next level? And my biggest question for him when he's at the Senior Bowl is I want to know what he's got between the ears. Can he accept that coaching while he's down there and show improvement? He's got those concentration drops and all those things, but he also shows the ability to make these crazy acrobatic circus catches as well. I think he does a great job of high pointing the ball. And at the same time, this is a gadget player. I've seen the Cordell Patterson comp thrown out. a half a dozen times at this point in time. And it makes sense because he does play everything. He's Wildcat quarterback. This is a Bruce Feldman's freaks less guy, reportedly throwing the ball 80 yards downfield, throwing the ball 80 fucking yards downfield. So he does that really well. Running back, he can play running back at the next level and be successful. He's Brian Robinson Jr. and Mike Williams' body is what I wrote down. So he's very interesting in that, right? He can punt return. He can kick return. I think he can play in the slot. I think he can play out wide. But do you have to scheme him up in a system? Is it going to be, hey, you're going to land with Shanahan and you're going to be great? You can land with those guys and be good. Or can I just put you out on the perimeter and can you be successful? Those are the biggest questions I have for him. He's very, very intriguing. Dude plays like an alien. He's a xenomorph. He's not from this planet. Reportedly 22 miles per hour as well. So the physical traits are all there. I think the route running has come a long way this past season. I did like what I saw. He's got some wiggle to his game, even though with that frame. I don't know if he's a full 6'5". I think he's probably 6'3", 6'4" at the max, but he's got the size. He knows how to use those long pterodactyl arms. And if he can get in the right scheme, I think this guy could be elite. If this is the guy that I think if we look back on this draft 2 to 3 years from now and we'll go, Savion, he went in the 4th, 5th round. Why did that guy not go in the first round? He had all the traits. It's similar to the Ayomanor, but I think he might be even hyped up even more. So if he can show me separation in those one-on-ones, I think this guy has the most to gain. Maybe. I'm talking out of my ass. I think out of these guys we're talking about tonight, probably the most to gain, though.
Josh, how about you?
No, absolutely. Savion's going to be a guy that I'm going to obviously watch everybody at the Senior Bowl, but my eyes are going to be tuned in when I'm watching Savion because he does have a lot to gain. But he's going to get drafted just off his athletic ability alone. Like Jake said, this guy is an alien. You can line him up at running back, wildcat quarterback, on the perimeter. You can scheme him up. And that's going to be the biggest question, just like Jake said. And I do believe this is a guy that's going to have to get drafted to a system to scheme him open to start his career. I think this is going to be kind of like a Quentin Johnson trajectory when he gets into the NFL, how he took a year to actually develop and figure out that he can't drop the ball. He actually needs to catch the ball with his athletic ability. And now we're starting to see with Jim Harbaugh, Quentin Johnson be the outside perimeter, reliable guy as the eggs to really help out that offense. And they really needed Johnson in that aspect. So I see a similar trajectory there, but play speed off the charts. I do like his separation quickness. I want to see it at the Senior Bowl. He has the ability to separate, but it's just how consistent can that be? Concentration drops. Again, he has the wide frame. He can make incredible acrobatic catches. That's going to be no doubt about his athletic ability, catching traffic, body control. It's just how consistent are those hands and regular just give me the ball, catch it with my chest. Nobody's draped on me. Those type of catches. I want to see how consistent his release is off the line of scrimmage. He does have that wiggle, kind of like a 6'1" wide receiver, a little bit. Even though he plays with a higher center of gravity, he plays like a guy with more of a medium, lower center of gravity. But how consistent is that wiggle off of better corners, off the line of scrimmage? And for me, it's the mental processing. How quickly can you pick things up? How quickly can I stick you out as a wide receiver and be fine knowing that you'll be able to run your route correctly, understand zone concepts, zone levels, where to sit down in zone coverage? That's the biggest question mark for me. But athletic ability tools alone, this guy is a freak. Hands down. Tet is a freak. Savion is also a freak. Those are the two freaks of this class. So nobody that we're talking about after Savion is nobody we're talking about with Savion is going to be higher than Egbuka or Ayomanor for me. But Savion is my wide receiver 6. I see him going at the top of second round. I have him in my top 50. And that, again, that's basing it on the athletic ability traits. This guy is a freak.
So I didn't give a round grade on that, but I do have him slightly lower. I have him as wide receiver 8 now. So we are very close on that, right? I have a day two pick on him. I see it as a 3rd-ish round grade just based off where he is today, but the potential very high, just like an Ayomanor. I think we're learning that about me and Josh is he may value potential slightly higher than I do, and I might just be a little coward, and maybe that's what it is. But I think Savion has an interesting ability to break tackles at the next level, and that's something I think can't go overlooked. That's something I always come back to with wide receivers, and it really started with a guy like A.J. Brown coming out of Ole Miss, played in the slot primarily, but the breaking tackle metrics have always been there, and it just translated to the next level. I think Savion is very similar in that, right? Broke 18 tackles, 30% of attempts. He broke at least one, which is by far the highest that we will talk about tonight. So that's something you got to love. And then the contested catch rate, 86%. That's like astronomical. The next highest that we're going to talk about today, 67%. So a full 20% higher. So that tells you how he attacks the football. It's just those little concentration things. He has the ability. It's just putting it all together.
Okay. And we'll be covering his teammate a little bit later in the podcast. Okay. The next player, so eligible, I believe, for Comeback Player of the Year in college football, Bru McCoy from Tennessee. So, Josh, you want to kick this one off?
So Bru McCoy has the height weight measurables that you are looking for as a primary X receiver. And that's been used well in Tennessee's offense. Once he's able to create separation vertically, he's easily able to run past defenders and get open to the end zone for those long touchdowns Tennessee wants to hit when they run those weird formations, which is their base formations, when they have 3 wide receivers all the way outside the number, everybody away from the line of scrimmage. That's just what you're going to get when you're watching receivers from Tennessee. So it's really more projecting on what they're going to be. I like his hands, really strong hands, strong at the catch point. I like his body control and catching traffic when he's in those jump ball 50-50 scenarios, when he's running down the seam, which is usually what his calling card is for me. I love his play strength, and I love what his potential and what he brings as a blocker, but that brings into the questions for me. And the big red flag for him is his medicals. How are they going to hold up? Because this is a guy who's injury prone. Whether it's to his fault or not, he has gone through a couple severe injuries and some nagging injuries that's kept him out for a lot of period of time. But he's relatively maintained his health this year, which is good to see. But I want to see improvements off his release in the line of scrimmage when he's going for anything besides those streak routes, when he's working those inside routes. I want to see him attack leverage better. His separation quickness is solid. This isn't a guy that's going to be able to separate high at the next level. And he brings solid yard after the catch. He's able to break tackles with his lower body strength, but he's not going to really outrun defenders with his speed in the open field. But those medicals are a really big question mark for me. And I love the prototypical height, weight, what he brings as a blocker, what he brings as a streak receiver. But that's all I'm going to ask for Bru McCoy if he gets to the NFL roster. I don't want him really putting his body on the line too much, but I have a draftable grade. He's a day 3 guy for me just because of those medicals. And really, this is a X receiver that you can really get going down the streaks with those long throws on those play action scenarios for me.
So Jake.
Yeah, Bru has had an interesting collegiate career, to say the least. I think he's going to be the oldest prospect that we talk about today, but starts out, commits to Texas, then decommits from Texas, then commits to USC, and then decides to transfer from USC, then commits to Texas again, but then decides not to play for Texas, and then transfers to Tennessee, and then he spends the last 3 years there. Has those medical red flags, like Josh said. When you have a catastrophic injury like he did last year, I always give them almost that next year as a red shirt. So watching this season, I think he did some good things on tape. I don't think it's what you're going to get out of him in the future, though. And that Tennessee Vol offense with Josh Heupel, they utilized him almost as an extension of the run game a lot of the times. It's throwing screens out to him, allowing him to get that yak yardage and try to break some tackles. He's got some wiggle to his game, even for his size. So I do like that. I think the next level, you can utilize him in a role similar to that. And he does offer that good run blocker role for you as well out there. I wrote down Chain Chomp. If you guys ever play Mario, Chain Chomp is the guy that's on the little stick and he runs out and he bites real quick. And he has a lot of these physical traits that you love. It's just a lot of bark and not a lot of bite. is what I see out of this prospect. I see a lot of JJ Arcega-Whiteside is what I wrote down. Was got a lot of that draft hype for his size and speed and all those good things, and then never came to fruition. I have an undrafted free agent grade on Bru right now. I could see this guy being a riser at the Senior Bowl, though. Maybe he can show out. This is a good place for him to do it. But at the end of the day, he's never been a good collegiate wide receiver. He never has. So why am I anticipating him being a good NFL wide receiver? That's my biggest question mark. But this is a guy that I do want to see, like the hand size and those measurables that come out, because the dude's got some mitts on him. He's going to be up there in that regard. And I think he's a menace in the open field. So it's not all bad with Bru. But at the end of the day, I don't see how this projects well at the next level.
Okay. Next player, Pat Bryant from Illinois. So, Jake, you want to kick this one off?
This is my baby boy of the cycle. I have fallen in love in Pat Bryant. I wrote down Applebee's Dollarita just because he gets the job done. He's good in every regard. He can run block for you really well, but I think he needs to blend his feet a little bit better with his hands at the line of scrimmage. So it's not all great. And I don't think this is the best athlete by any means either, but he's average in a lot of those regards and he's fine there, but he shines in a lot of great other places. 10 touchdowns this season. He's got a 14.2 average depth of target. So he's getting open downfield and causing separation. Contested catch rate. He's not Savion, 66.7, but that's still on the upper scale. This is second that I was talking about earlier. So he's good in that right as well. When he is targeted by his quarterback, the rating of the quarterback is 141.4, which I think is going to top out this class. I think he will be number one in that regard. And Jim, you shared it earlier today. Leads the nation in game-winning touchdown catches. So this is a gamer in that right as well. And a 2.83 yards per route run. Again, the highest that we'll talk about these next 2 weeks. So Pat Bryant has a lot of great things that he puts out on the field. But at the same time, everything I hear from Illinois, I think he's got a lot of those intangibles that are going to translate as well. You think he's going to come in as a pro's pro from a very early part in his career? I have a 3rd round grade on him right now. And that's only because I had to talk myself down to earth. I had that second on there and I was like, that's too high right now. I got to pull it back. So I dropped it down to a 3rd round grade right now. But after the Senior Bowl, maybe we're talking high day 2 instead of low day 2.
So Josh, how about you?
So keep playing short and simple. This is Jakobi Meyers in college at Illinois. This is a guy that, again, is going to be a Robin in an offense, but this is a guy you can plug and play year one. And this is a guy that's going to get those 800, 900 yards on a yearly consistent basis and consistently get himself open. I love how he's able to sit down in zone coverage and really understand the defense that's playing on him. And man coverage, he attacks separation quickness really well, especially on those dig routes over the middle of the field. I think that's where he's going to make his money in the NFL, the 10 to 15 to 20 yard range when he's working over the middle of the field, making those strong contested catches if need be. He's really well-rounded in my eyes. He blocks his ass off. He has good mental processing. I like his toughness. And he's not going to be the most athletic guy in the world, but so be it. This guy can get open. Like Jake said, the only criticism I have is I want to see his feet better with his hands at the line of scrimmage with his release. It's solid right now, but if he can improve on that, then his draft stock's only going to rise and his ability is only going to get better as a pro. But I have him as a late 2nd round grade. I have him as a top 64 player. He's firmly in there for me. It's a plain, simple, short scouting report. This is Jakobi Meyers reincarnated.
I wrote down Sidney Rice for my call.
Ooh, good pull.
I really liked his tape. And yeah, I thought I would be the highest on the show for Pat Bryant, just because where I'm seeing him, most people have him as a 5th to 6th round grade from what I've seen recently. And I think that's completely mislabeled. I think Pat Bryant is going to be the darling that comes out of Mobile, out of the receiver position.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to give a shout out to the Illinois wide receiver coaches. So Isaiah
Yep.
Williams was at the Senior Bowl last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or was that 2 years ago? I think it was last
I want to
year.
say those two. I was thinking 2 years ago. I could be
Was that 2
mistaken.
years
Though.
ago?
They all
He
blend
spent
together.
He spent some time on the Detroit practice squad, got cut, and now he's returning punts for the Bengals.
Yeah.
So Illinois has another wide receiver in this draft. We're not covering him on this episode, but they have another wide receiver that's coming out as well, who's just going to be probably more of a UDFA. But definitely got to give a shout out to a program that can continually put out a specific position. Right, like there's a wide receiver coach there somewhere that's definitely, recruiting.
I don't know his name, but get that guy an OC job somewhere. Time to move up in the world.
Tennessee might need one, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, the next wide receiver, Jaylin Noel from Iowa State. So, Jake, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, Noel is a player I thought I was going to be higher on when I turned on the tape, just because of the highlights that I've seen, just watching some Iowa State tape throughout the season. I think this is a guy that's going to come in and start as a slot receiver for somebody very early in his career. So that can't go undenounced. And there's still some things I think needs to be worked on within that tape. I think he's closer to a Christian Kirk than he is a Jalen Reagor at this point in time. I think it could be really good in some rights. I got to see him in the open field be able to make somebody miss. I forget what it is. I have it here somewhere. It's like a 4% broken tackle rate, which is the lowest by 15% that we're going to talk about these next 2 weeks. So he's got to do better a job in that, right? I think he has the speed, and once he can separate vertical separation, not a huge issue with him, in my opinion. I think he does a good job in that, right? And you got to catch the ball before you can run away from somebody. So again, I think that's great. I think the yards throughout this season, the production, I think all of those things are great. Just going through my stuff. He doesn't have the ability to play out wide at all. Pure slot, instantly goes down to contact. I wrote down Pikachu. I think he looks like Pikachu out there to me. So he can definitely sting you. He can get you with that thunderbolt, and that's just blowing by you. So you get that deep threat. But at the end of the day, I think that might be all that I really saw out of his game. So it's not a well-versed prospect. What he does very well. But that's just about it, in my opinion. So I have a 5th round grade on him right now, and I think I'm going to be the lower one out of consensus on this player. But at the end of the day, like I said, he's just kind of limited to me. So he's definitely a draftable prospect. He's going to make a 53, and he's going to come in early and contribute as a slot, potentially a returner as well, maybe.
So Josh, how about you?
I really like what Noel can bring as a returner, in my opinion. I think he will be right on those the new kickoff rules. I think he'll be one of the guys that they'll instantly plug back there and make a guy miss with his speed in the open field if he gets a lane. But like Jake said, this is a slot-only receiver. I don't want him lining up on the boundary. On his releases against press man coverage, he just gets swallowed up at the line of scrimmage. So this is only going to be a slot receiver for you, but he can win with speed. He can win with speed with his yard after catch. He has strong hands. He can make good catches over the middle of the field. I like his mental processing, high IQ player, really knows and understands zone coverage as well. I want to see improvements on his body control and catching traffic if he's draped one-on-one in man coverage, if he's able to separate. He's able to separate with his speed vertically. When he's working over the middle of the field in man coverage, that's going to be a big question mark to me. And then you're not going to ask this guy to be a reliable blocker at the next level. He shows the willingness. He shows good tape at times. But with that frame, you're not going to have him really helping out in the run game as much. But I have a 4th round grade on him. I think this is a slot only, like Jake said, and he's able to make people miss with his speed and his separation quickness vertically. And he's had the good production this year. So returnability, good production, strong hands, good speed. There's a lot to like out of Jaylin Noel, but there's a specific role for him in the NFL.
I think he reminds me a lot of where we are in this process of a guy like Jaden Reed when he was coming out of Michigan State. there was the tape out there that looked great, and then he kind of came out and he kept rising up draft boards. I think that's where Noel is going to be. I think he's going to continue to rise as we proceed through this process. For me, I just got to see a little bit more before I get there.
Mm-hmm.
So Jake, Noel or Ayomanor, who's higher?
Oh, Ayomanor. Yeah.
Okay. Because you said you had 4th, 5th round grade on Ayomanor?
I have 4th on him, 5th on.
Oh, got it.
Noel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Quan Felton from Virginia Tech. So, Jake, you want to kick off Quan Felton?
Yeah, Felton, again, another late bloomer out here, played 4 years at Norfolk State. I think he sat out the year of COVID, if not the year after that, before transferring to VTech. As soon as he got on the scene, he was that dude, pulled in 8 touchdowns in his first season, got some notice, was on a lot of the draft media's boards of, hey, let's watch this kid and what he does this season. Didn't really put it all together this season. And I think a lot of that comes down to his ability to not create separation down the field. And you look at that frame, that's 6'5", 216. This is a guy that should just be able to go up and snag the football with those long arms. I don't think he has a great understanding how to use that frame just yet in those contested situations. When it's just those short, intermediate yard routes, I think he's a good natural hand catcher. It's those pop-up balls. He just brings it in, and I hate that for him. But this is a guy that, if he puts it together, can be amazing. I think he has all the potential in the world, but he could also just be another Chase Claypool, and that does scare me a little bit. Once he gets off the line of scrimmage, the dude is like an electric go-kart. As soon as you push that pedal to the floor, he's at his top speed instantly. It's just not very fast. But also reported 4.42 40 time. That just doesn't show up for me on tape. Unfortunate. Maybe that's just my eyes. I just don't see that. But he's got to show his ability to create at the Senior Bowl some separation. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. If this guy is just a jump ball specialist at the next level, it's really going to limit him, and it's really going to knock him down some boards. I have a 7th round grade on him right now. But again, this guy, he's got some variance to him. He could go up a lot higher. He could go down a lot lower, depending on what happens in Mobile.
So, Josh, how about you?
So, Daquan is very developmental, but he has the size that you would want to develop. And one thing that you need to have as a receiver that Daquan already has that he doesn't need to develop on, he can always get better at, but his release at the line of scrimmage is very nuanced. It's very good for his size. And even though he doesn't have the burner speed, it's only solid, in my opinion, average. He doesn't have the separation quickness, and he's not going to make people miss yard after catch. He's able to release off the line of scrimmage. So that's one part of the game, and you just got to add on to the other things. But the reason he's going to get drafted is because this is the best run blocking wide receiver in this class. And it's 100%. Not just the size and the frame. It's the way he executes on those gap runs, on those zones, on those crack blocks. He just puts people down to the ground. And it's with ease, and he showed that with consistency all year long. And for me, if he's going to be on the field, that's all I want him doing, really. I'm with Jake. He has the frame to do those contested catches with the wingspan, but he doesn't. It's just not natural to him, and it's not comfortable to him. He makes those basket catches, doesn't really high point the ball at all. And that's something I'm going to be keeping my eyes out on the Senior Bowl, because if you are 6'4", where I have him at 216 pounds, you better go up and jump and get the ball over people. That's just a non-negotiable, especially with these corners who are 6 foot, 6'1", 5'11". It should be no question. So that, his speed, his separation quickness, his yard after catch, there is a lot to work on with Daquan Felton. But you can play him 25% of the snaps right away and know dang well he's going to cover the perimeter of the field with his run blocking. And that is no question in my mind. The best run blocker in this class. He's a draftable guy for me, 6th to 7th round, but a lot of tools that you would like, a lot of development needed.
Yeah, and it's interesting as I was listening to you guys. So I believe this is the receiver that Cole, so if anybody has watched the Friday podcast, Cole called him a really small tight end or power slot. Right? Because of the run blocking. Go ahead, Jake.
No, I was just going to say that you could definitely, this is the guy maybe you talk about as a developmental piece. trying to add 15 to 20 pounds to this frame. And maybe this is a guy that can look out there like a Kyle Pitts, a Chigakonkwo. Maybe that's a guy that you can develop into that move tight end. I don't think he'll ever have the ability to block inline, no matter how much weight you put on this guy's frame. But at the end of the day, you're matching him up against a corner, a safety, an overhang linebacker. I think he's gonna do his job there very well. So I think there's some different routes you can go with Felton at the next level, having him be that just outside perimeter jump man, or potentially that H-back almost tight end move guy for you.
Okay, so before we jump into the last two receivers, let's pause here. And Jake, you want to tell everybody kind of who you are, how they can find your content?
Yeah, Jake Robertson. Follow me at Glory Day Sports, primarily on X. You can also check out the Morning Glory Show live every Thursday mornings, 7 Central Standard Time. Every Thursday, me, B. Will, and Jonathan Miller are bringing you, if not draft takes, we're talking Titans. And as we move into, and God bless Drew Lock. Let's bring that up right now, because he moves the Titans into the second overall pick just based off that performance that he puts out there at the same time that Saquon Barkley's running for 2,000 plus yards, just burying those Giants down lower. So that puts us in a good striking difference. So we'll be talking a lot more draft as we progress through this next and final week for the Titans. So definitely come check us out there. It's always fun. We always usually end each show in the offseason with a draft of sorts. It might be your favorite beer. It might be having a brawl in a supermarket, and you got to find those and draft those weapons. So we always have fun over there. So go join us over there every Thursday morning.
Cool. Josh.
So Josh Townsend, you can follow me at Twitter at juice_T23. I'm with Scouts Eye View, internship ran by Luke Strenard, ESPN assistant, former NFL scout, where we're going over the same thing, and we're going to be bringing you guys content once college season ends and everybody starts getting their free time. In the meantime, follow NFL Draft Fanatic on Twitter, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel where they're doing daily draft podcasts, going over everybody at every position. You're not going to find more in-depth content. Make sure to follow at Glory Day Sports on Twitter and check out their podcast. And as the Senior Bowl gets going, you're going to get live content from all of us who are going to be down there interviewing players, giving our thoughts on the practices. And you're going to get an in-depth look of what it's like to actually be there and see these guys in person and get our actual opinions from it. So make sure to stay tuned for all the content that we're going to be bringing you guys. There's no other place that gives more in-depth content than we do.
Yeah. So as Josh said, there's a few of us at Draft Professor that are going to the Senior Bowl. So, we have daily content, and we have at this point about 22 people that are putting out on at least one podcast a day. Right now, Jake and Josh have Mondays all to themselves, but nearly every other day of the week, there are 2 podcasts. So find us. It doesn't matter what position you want to listen about. There's a channel at NFL Draft Fanatic on YouTube. And there's a channel for wide receivers. There's a channel for running backs. There's a channel for linebackers. I have a feeling you're going to see Jake and Josh a little bit in that running back and linebacker channel. We are covering the draft. We're trying to focus on players in the top 175, the players with rounds 1 through 5. So I appreciate Jake and Josh. You know, we've been podcasting at this point for 3 months. So I appreciate you guys kind of, let's say, either feeding my ego or following me blindly. I don't know how to describe that, but hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that like button on YouTube. Give at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I am Fanatic, a follow on X. That's where all of the daily content comes. Give at Juice_T23 a follow on X. Give at Glory Day Sports a follow on X, please. So we are putting out draft content. There's a little bit of content just on Twitter itself, and followed by podcasts literally every day in the draft. So with that being said, we are going to cover our final 2 players, and the first of that is Jack Bech from TCU. So Jake, you want to tell us what you saw with Jack Bech?
Yeah, Jack Bech, I think, has been the early riser around the draft community at this position. Starts his career at LSU. He's a Louisiana kid himself, has 500 yards as a true freshman over guys like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. I think some people may have heard of them before, and that's why Mac Johnson's at quarterback. And that next season, they did kind of jump him. So he did fall down that pecking order. That's when Jaden Daniels comes to town and starts building that resume for himself. And that led Bech to end up transferring down to TCU, where that first season he struggled with injuries. So he didn't get to see the field a whole lot. And then that brings us to this year where he just explodes. And we see a lot of what we saw as a true freshman. He brings a lot of great things to tape. And he does all the little things really well. I wrote down, this is prime Dirk Nowitzki when he is on that playoff run. He might not be the best athlete out there, but he has many ways to defeat you, if not at the line of scrimmage throughout the route, and he's very physical. I absolutely love that. Also, 3 consecutive state titles in high school basketball. So going back to that Dirk Nowitzki vibes. So I think this is a guy, what I saw on tape, very similar to almost like a Juju Smith-Schuster coming out of USC when he was a rookie. And you see that first year where he was very productive, but he never really came hotter than that. That was really the eclipse of his career. I think Jack has the ability to kind of take that to the next level. Again, not the hyper athlete, but he has the ability to create separation. And I think he does. We need to see more offensive pass interference because you get away with it 9 times out of 10. I think Jack gets away with it a lot. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. I think at the line of scrimmage, best hands at defeating press. The way he just chops them down and gets past them, absolutely love that. He's not afraid to tussle in the run game either. He's a hyper effective blocker, in my opinion. He might not be Felton out there, but he's dang close, I think. So I absolutely love that. I want to see – I talk about how he defeats press at the line of scrimmage and all that. At the same time, didn't necessarily face elite competition this season. I mean, the best game he would have played, I think, would have been Kansas with Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson. I don't think he lined up against Kobe once, though. So he did have some catches on Melo, though. So I do like to see that. But how does he go down and fare against a Trey Amos, a Darian Porter out there? I want to see that step up in competition and see if he can continue what he's doing this season. Also, does he retain that physicality at the next level? He's listed at 6'2", 215 there. I think I have him at 218, so just slightly bigger. I want to see if he can continue that physicality at the next level against these larger corners. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that's got the production, had over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, avoided tackle percentages up there. Love that. Contested catch percentages up. Targeting QB rating 130. So he's going to be a young quarterback's best friend, I think. And he also brings that inside out versatility. I think he can play on the slot, and that might be his best position as that power forward for you out there. But I think he can also survive on the outside. I think he has just enough juice to be able to create separation there. So this is a guy that – when I'm watching him at Savion, I wrote down mind Jack Bech, but deep in my loins, it's Savion Williams. So as of right now, Bech is slightly higher with a 3rd round grade, and then Savion also has the 3rd round grade, but is slightly lower. But I love Bech. I love Bech.
So Josh, how about you?
Bech, just like we've talked about with Egbuka and a couple other guys, is going to be a quarterback's best friend at the next level. And Jake hit on it when he was a freshman at LSU. He really stood out compared to Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas of the world. But he was also used as an H-back, also an inline tight end at times. So he has the mental processing. He has the high IQ to be able to line up all over the middle of the field. And Jake hit it right on the head with everything he said. This guy wins with physicality, physicality, physicality. If you don't have the speed, the separation quickness, the wiggle, the athletic ability to beat people just on athleticism alone, you have to have what Jack Bech has. Strong hands to chop down at the line of scrimmage against press man. Physicality to beat people with separation quickness when they're on their hip and just move people off the line. Jake hit it when he should get called for a lot of pass interference calls, but he gets away with it, and I'm more than fine with it. But I want to see it at the Senior Bowl. Is that consistent against guys like Darian Porter, Trey Amos, the more athletic corners that he's going to be faced against? How is he against higher level of competition? But against zone coverage, I think this guy has the makes and tools to be able to move the chains so effortlessly and efficiently, especially in that slot. I think that's his calling card in the NFL. But if you want to line him up as a wide receiver on the outside, his body control and catching traffic this year has been the one thing that I've been most impressed about, seeing his progression in that aspect. He's able to out-athleticism people at the jump ball point, high point the ball, and come down with it with strong hands. And he brings it in the run blocking aspect too, converting from an H-back tight end to a slot / outside wide receiver. He brings the prowess there as well. So this is a guy that's going to do all the dirty work for you, sit over the middle of the field. And if you need to hit him one-on-one on the outside, he'll win with his physicality and his catch point. So I like a lot that Jack Bech brings, but this isn't the uber athlete of the world, and that's going to knock him down some boards. And the Senior Bowl is going to be really big for him too, to see if he can create that separation like he has this year. So I'm right with Jake. He's a third-round grade for me. He's firmly in my top 100. I don't see him falling out of the day two. This is a plug-and-play guy right away at the NFL that you know what you're getting, and he brings it at a really high level and competes his ass off.
Yeah, so the week before we did our first podcast, when we did running backs and linebackers, whenever it was, that was when Randall covered Jack Bech. So that was late October, early November. And Randall planted the flag that you guys just planted. Randall's higher on him than both of you, but Randall's basically just saying second round.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to fall out of the top 64. So I definitely want to give a shout out to Randall. But if I were to say Anquan Bolden, do you see that in Bech's game?
It's hard to compare anybody to Bolden.
Extent.
But if there was a guy to compare to Bolden, Bech has a lot of the makeups that's eerily similar. That's not Anquan Bolden, but the makeups there, yeah.
It's not the same body. It's not the same body, right? Because Bolden was probably 20 pounds bigger,
Yeah.
I think. Right. And Jake, what were you going to add on that? You said that's not what came to your mind. Is that what you said?
No, not necessarily. I like Anquan Bolden a lot, and I think there's a reason he held that record as a rookie for as long as he did. I don't think Bech is quite that. If he was, we would be talking about him as a first-round prospect. Slightly lower. I think the body type is decently different, and I think at the end of the day, Bech just isn't quite the athlete of a Bolden.
My comp for Bech was Jericho Cotchery, if that makes it any
That sounds better to me.
Yeah, that's who I wrote down for Jack Bech.
Okay. And our last receiver of the day, Tai Felton from Maryland. So, Josh, this is almost around the corner for you, right?
Yeah, and I always love my Maryland prospects. And I know this is one of your guys, Jim. So I got to really hype him up for you the best I can. But this guy, high IQ football player, really has taken that step this year and emerged as a wide receiver one for Maryland and really that go-to guy alongside Caden Prather, where Prather beats you with speed, and more speed. Tai Felton does everything else besides that. He's a really good release off the line of scrimmage, strong hands, can make contested catches. For a guy that's not super fast, he can separate so easily against man coverage when he gets to the top of his stem routes. His body control is good. His athletic ability is good. He can make people miss over the middle of the field with his yard after catch. Even though he's at 186 pounds, he's got that wiggle. He's got that elusiveness to him. He's got the high IQ. He plays with good toughness. But for me, I don't know how the speed will translate to the NFL, if he'll be able to beat vertical people down the field on the outside, if this is a guy that can exclusively work over the middle of the field, or can he beat you downfield with those deep throws 20 to 30 yards down the field? I would like to see also how that frame will hold up in run blocking. You saw good tape from him this year, but how will that hold up at the point of attack at the next level? That's a question mark for me. But the high IQ obviously shows on tape. Super productive this year, really reliable over the middle of the field, can really extend yard after the catch. This is going to be one of the receivers that you draft in day 2 that's going to step in and make instant production at the NFL. Not the same type of body as Stephon Diggs, but one of those Stephon Diggs types where he's just emerging over the middle of the field. And Tai Felton's going to make his bread and butter like that in the NFL for me. So I'm a little lower than where Jim and most of you guys are going to have him. I have him as a 3rd-round grade. He's in my top 100 firmly. For me, it's the speed downfield and how quickly can he get to that top speed, and is that enough for the NFL? That's my biggest question from him, along with run blocking, but everything else he has excelled at this year.
So Jake, how about you?
I will say you are safe, Josh, because I am by far the lowest is what I'm finding out here. I have a 5th-round grade on him, and I had 6th wrote initially. This is the most productive receiver we will be talking about tonight. 3rd in receptions, I believe, tied there. So this is a guy that had 1,100 plus yards, 9 touchdowns. A lot of the times this Maryland offense ran through Tai Felton, and that yak yardage, I think he does a great job at that. And a lot of the times with these not bigger schools, you just get your playmakers the ball. And I think that's what they did with Felton a lot of the times. What I did enjoy a lot of the times was his deeper route tree, those intermediate to deeper routes. I think that is kind of where he did excel, and I want to see more of that while we're in Alabama. So I think that's great. I wrote down Sammy Watkins as a comp. So you said Stephon Diggs, if I remember. Maybe I know they had an overlap in some periods of time, so those teammates. So I really think this is a guy that I want to ask, why did it take so long?
Yeah.
Why was that explosion this season, and where was that the rest of your entire collegiate career? Because this was a guy that, Josh, you're close to him, so maybe he was on your radar, but the rest of the draft community, nobody was sniffing him out there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a guy that I don't think is a great run blocker, like you mentioned. I think he is limited in a lot of those rights. I also don't think he's 6'2". I think this is a 6-foot receiver. I don't see the height there.
I have him at 6'1", so yeah.
Yeah, I have him just under 6'1".
Yeah.
I also think he's a little bit larger than 186. I have him just under 200.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a guy that's probably going to project into the slot, maybe a returner as well. Probably do that very well, in my opinion. At the Senior Bowl, maybe he can prove me wrong and show some more of that on tape. But from the brief overview I've watched over these last couple of weeks, he's in that same realm of a lot of these other guys we're talking about tonight, and we'll talk about them next week, that Kyron Lacey, Jaylin Noel, Jaden Higgins, Tai Felton, they're all in that kind of same mold for me, same range-ish. So this is a guy that could raise up my board a lot and get closer to consensus based off what we see out there. But at the same time, I got to see a little bit more than 1 year wonder for me.
I think I was higher on him earlier in the draft cycle because, like, early in the season, I think his better games were early. Mm-hmm. As I watched him more, I noticed that he dropped a few more passes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I also do want to give a shout out. So I saw Maryland's senior night. So whatever game they were playing their senior night, he was covering punts in senior night. He's a gunner. He had the returner dead to rights. He missed the tackle, but then got up and made the tackle after the returner gained about 5 or 7 yards.
Nice.
So he is definitely, I think, like a team guy. Like you'll want him in the locker room. He'll play teams for you.
No, absolutely.
So, but I'm probably not as high on him maybe as I was 2 months ago. But I'm still somewhere at that day 2 range. It's just unfortunate for me. Buffalo doesn't have a 3rd round pick. So,
Same for the Titans. So we're the same right there.
We have 2 seconds, but we don't have a third. So
I will say I can't remember off the top of my head. It was either Tai Felton or Jaylin Noel. It was one of those two players, in my opinion, that it was like round 5, or not round 5. By week 5, they had 3 games that were like 140, 180-ish yards. Mm-hmm. And then it did have a drastic drop off. I want to, it may have been Noel just based off the overall production between the two, but I got that same vibe that you were getting, Jim.
Yep. Cool. So that concludes this episode. Just want to kind of give a couple of shout outs. So on this channel, we're going to have one podcast tomorrow, and that's already been recorded. You'll be able to watch some offensive linemen, I think, at lunchtime. New Year's Day, there's going to be several. We're actually recording a lot of podcasts tomorrow during the day. They'll be broadcast on edge and offensive line. So that's Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, Newt and Owen have a guest, and we're going to talk about the positions to build a franchise around. And then Newt's got a little grading formula that he boosts certain positions' grades when he does their draft evaluation. So I'm fascinated for that discussion. We also, I believe, have a Shrine and Hula Bowl episode on Thursday. We have a Senior Bowl episode early on Friday, and we have a new podcast Friday night called Draft Roundtable. So I have no idea what's going to happen if everybody at Draft Professor is in the same room, but that's what the Draft Roundtable is. I don't always know what we're going to talk about. I'm not trying to control the conversation, but if you hear some of the conversations that we have before the podcast or after the podcast, the genius is, well, that's really good content. Let's just get everybody in a room and see what they choose to talk about. So that's Friday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern. So for all of you watching, thank you. Please, oh, there we go, right there. follow Josh, follow Jake, follow myself. We appreciate you. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you at the next podcast. Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on YouTube, X, and Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. If you have a moment, try using some of the Draft Professor mock draft functionality, including a first-round challenge, a second-round challenge, rank players, and draft a team. Thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on our daily draft podcast tomorrow.